So President Joe Biden's regulatory agenda has proven to be even more costly than that of former President Barack Obama through the first 30 months of their respective presidencies. Now, this was just put together by the American Action Forum, and Biden's regulatory state has implemented 620 final rules totaling an estimated $395.5 billion in costs to you and $232.4 million in paperwork hours. That's great. Now, that's just through two and a half years. Now, Obama had issued 926 final rules, which led to $222.4 billion and 145 million hours of paperwork. But he wants to go further. And what they're looking at now, is, the $19 billion in total cost and the 4.4 million in annual paperwork hours that he issued just last week. Not far enough. Congress is saying, hey, maybe we should have a declared emergency because it's hot outside. Okay. All right. Okay. Probably not the best idea, but we are joined now by Carol Roth, who has this and so many other things. They're all related, and all related to her new book, You Will Own Nothing, which is a New York Times bestseller. By the way, New York Times bestseller, her first week out, her book beat mine on the New York Times bestseller list, of course, by one, but both of us were just shy of the top 10, which is so weird because we're the number one and number two or number two and number three book in America, but can't seem to make it to the top 10. Do you know why? Because all of the bookstores and the airports and everything else where you go to buy a book, they put out front the top 10 best-selling books according to the New York Times. The airports order the top 10 books of the country. So this way, gosh darn it, they just don't have to order those two books, and they want to really badly. Carol, welcome to the program.
Glenn, first of all, thank you for all your help in making the book a New York Times bestseller. But it was so clear that they didn't even want to put it on the list. If you look at the description of my book, somebody said it looked like AI wrote it. It was like a person wrote some stuff about things. That literally was like the description of the book.
Wow.
I'm shocked that they even put it on altogether. But you're right. Your book
I know.
Smashed it 2 weeks in a row and should have been at the top of the New York Times bestseller list.
So, Carol, congratulations on the success of this, but I want to talk to you about a couple of things. Today, I'm seeing the news come out that the president is holding back. He doesn't want to. But he may be forced by the members of Congress to issue an emergency declaration, which would affect air travel, car travel, and every aspect of your life. I remember the last time we had a president declare a state of an emergency, and it wasn't good. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was going to say, I've seen the original movie, and I'm not very interested in the sequel. I'm very excited that they have all discovered summer. I personally am very happy that we have fossil fuels that can power things like air conditioning and refrigeration so that when the temperature changes, as it always has done throughout, all of time, that we can deal with it if it becomes too hot or too cold. That's, this neat technology and these wonderful fossil fuels that improve our lives and human flourishing. But they love an emergency because an emergency allows for central planning and an exercise of power. It allows them to shape the economy. It allows them to pick winners and losers. It allows them to take people who are socially unacceptable and remove their economic opportunities and remove their freedoms. It allows them to control what's being said on social media. That was so delicious. They did not want COVID to end. COVID only ended because
Correct.
a bunch of us stood up and said, we're done, and you had that one judge who said no more mask mandates on planes, which I was reliably told we were all going to die after that happened, and, we're still here. And once that happened, that was sort of the symbolic end to it. And they said, okay, we can't do this anymore. But wow, if we could just concoct another emergency that would give us the opportunity to control these things, which, by the way, is what this climate catastrophization is all about. It's this existential threat where nobody's actually acting like it's an emergency, but we need to tell people that the future of the Earth is at stake, just like happened back in War of the Worlds.
So there are some amazing things that are happening. Let me go to John Kerry, the audio of John Kerry talking about limiting the food supply. We played this yesterday. I want to play it again today for you because they even talk about how a climate emergency would give the president access to all of the agricultural bills in the United States, bypass Congress, and become very draconian on agriculture. Here's John Kerry.
Agriculture contributes about 33% of all the emissions of the world, depending a little bit on how you count it, but it's anywhere from 26 to 33. And we can't get to net zero. We don't get this job done unless agriculture is front and center as part of the solution. But with a growing population on the planet, we just crossed the threshold of 8 billion fellow citizens around the world. We just crossed that in this last year. Emissions from the food system alone are projected to cause another 0.5 degree of warming by mid-century on the current course that we are today. A 2-degree future could result in an additional 600 million people not getting enough to eat. And you just can't continue to both warm the planet while also expecting to feed it.
Carol, what's that mean to you?
Yeah, so I don't know whether to laugh or to cry. Obviously this is so incredibly nefarious. They're wanting to interfere with the food system. But listen to what he just said. He said, people are going to starve, so we have to get rid of agriculture. What? Like, on what planet does he think that sentence makes any sense? But this is part of their agenda.
To be fair, hang on just a sec. To be fair, he's not saying let's get rid of it. He's just saying let's redesign it from seed to fork. And I have not seen, it's one thing when somebody comes out with an electric car that works, can power itself, is wonderful, like Tesla, they sell. When it's jammed down people's throats and, like for Ford, not knowing what they're really doing, just being forced to do it, it doesn't sell. You invent a better mousetrap and people will flock to it. But they don't invent new mousetraps. They don't have the new mousetrap. They keep promising a new mousetrap, but it doesn't show up. And we're doing that with energy. And now, terrifyingly, we are doing it to food as well. Stop what you're doing. And then we'll tell you what we are going to do.
Yeah, no, I think this is an intentional messing with things that work for their own gain. One of the things that I researched, and you will own nothing, is something that came out of the World Economic Forum rabbit hole. It was called the Food Action Alliance. And basically, they said they want to bring together the international community to tackle an urgent historic challenge to reshape the way we think, produce, and consume food, which, by the way, has been working really, really well until all of these lunatics started getting involved. So this is something that they've been on. This is that Food Action Alliance they had put in place with Mark Rutte, who was the former prime minister at the time of the Netherlands. He's since been removed. But the Netherlands is the second largest food exporter in the world behind the United States. So they're certainly going after the places where there's meaningful food supply, which is working quite well, and then all of a sudden claiming under the guise of climate or, whatever hysteria they're coming up with, that they need to tackle some sort of an urgent problem that doesn't exist. And so that's very frightening to me, that they're trying to come up with these solutions to problems that don't exist, which means that they're reshaping this in order to maintain their wealth and power. And we know throughout history, Glenn, when this happens, when you have the central planning around food, that people end up starving because you cannot replicate that the way that the free market does. And a lot of times it's not even the growth of food, it's just the getting it to where it needs to go. But we need to keep these people out of it. And, by the way, we need to focus on the decentralization of farming and farmland, because that's the other big issue, is that you have a lot of these elite, wealthy, well-connected university endowments and the like that are buying up productive land, including farmland, including ranches, including vineyards with water rights and the like. And, the mega millions are tonight over $1 billion. I have stated that if I were to win that, the number one thing I'm doing is helping farmers stay independent, because I think it's going to be that much of an urgent situation.
Oh, big time, big time. I mean, when I heard them talking about a national emergency for climate change, I have to tell you that affects, they can do anything. Stay in your home. You are required to keep your heat or your air conditioning, at 80 degrees. They can do absolutely anything they want with an emergency, and Congress really can't do anything about it. This is a little terrifying when you see the power that they are grabbing onto, what their plan is to give us new green energy, but we don't have the new green energy. And so what they're doing is just shutting all of our energy down. We don't have the new way. I mean, prove it. Show it in a country. Show it in farmland that is not doing well, that's not producing half of the food for America. Show me this new system, put it in place, and the world will beat a path to your door. But they don't want to do that because they don't have anything, because this is truly about control. Yesterday, I played something. Go ahead.
Well, I would say they also want to play God here. I mean, the food that they're talking about replacing is from the earth. It's from Mother Nature. It's the way that God intends it. They want to have fake meat and things that they grow in a factory that has Lord knows what, and say, oh, no, we got you. We've come up with this slop that is going to replace this. Don't worry about it. So they may actually come up with a solution and say this is the solution, but I want to eat the food that comes from the earth, not the one that comes from Bill Gates' laboratory.